Epstein Street.
So they finally devise a plan and they set out to make it happen. Fast forward to the day where the plan is to be executed. Okay, this is the day. Today is the day that the plan is to be executed. This is the day that Lila has philosophy class with Professor Schwartz. So it's now the end of the class. Lila's packing up her stuff, her notes. She's sticking things into her backpack. She can see out the corner of her eye that Professor Schwartz is studying her movements. She pays it absolutely no attention, and she pretends to be oblivious. But she's also relieved because this wasn't going to work if he wasn't paying that much attention to her anyways. She would have had to put on more of a show, and at that point it would have been harder to sell and less convincing. So she pulls out her phone and she starts walking towards the exit, and Professor Schwartz gets up with his things and casually begins to walk out with the group of students that are also walking out. And the minute she steps outside, she turns to one of her classmates. She's not super good friends with this classmate, but they talk occasionally. She just needed somebody to respond to her so that she can say what she needed to say out loud, which is, oh my God, do you remember anything about that tragic event on Epstein Street? Now this classmate, we can call them Jenny. Jenny's nice-ish, and she was a little worried that Jenny might look at her like, I don't know what you're talking about. So she's not super mean, but the two of them, they've spoken in the past, and so she was sure that she was gonna get some kind of response from Jenny. So Jenny's like, I may have heard something about it. I don't really know much about Epstein Street. I just know that no one really likes to go there. Why? What happened? And she can see Professor Schwartz stop dead in his tracks, standing in the doorway of the classroom. And so Lila says, apparently, all of the people that they said died aren't actually dead. And so Jenny's like, okay, you know what? That right there, way too real for me. That's crazy. And so Jenny scurries off. Professor Schwartz, perfect opportunity to walk up to her, and he was like, what article is that? Very uncomfortable. But Lila keeps her cool. And she's like, oh, it's just this article right here. And she's turning the phone to show him, and just in time, her phone rings. Roderick is calling her. And she's like, oh, you know what, I gotta take this call, Professor Schwartz, but I'm pretty sure you can probably Google it and find it. It's on the internet. Everybody talks about Epstein Street. And she takes the call and starts to walk in another direction. Professor Schwartz stands there for a second and speeds off in the direction of his office. Right down the hall was Roderick. Roderick doesn't attend his class. The two of them don't know one another. Professor Schwartz has no reason to see Roderick and think, hello, sir, or hello, how are you doing, and all the other. They don't know one another. So as Professor Schwartz storms past where Roderick was just standing, observing the conversation enough to know this is my cue to call, he starts to follow behind him. Carefully. Professor Schwartz gets to his office, he grabs whatever it is he grabs, and he storms back out his office, locks it, and heads towards his car. So then Lila and Roderick go towards Roderick's car. Very discreetly, they are paying attention to Professor Schwartz's car. They know what he drives, and they know what to look for once they leave the campus. And so they're trying to keep up with him. It gets a little difficult to keep up with him in the swarm of students going to other classes and, getting in their cars and trying to get things done, making it to the stores on campus and yada, yada, yada. But everyone that is on this side of the campus, they all park within the same area. So they get to the car and they're trying to keep up with him. And so they follow behind him long enough to see that he reaches a residential area. They stay far enough behind to park on the street and obviously not pull up in his driveway behind him. They now know where he lives. They obviously can't follow him into his home, but they now have to see what it is he's rushing in there to do. Here's the next part of the plan. Samira, is there any way you can get inside there? and communicate with me and tell me what he's doing. Samira takes a minute to respond to the summon, and she's like, I'm on it. I will see if I can make it happen. But with your power, I'm telling you, I've been feeling more and more real, and we have to keep our fingers crossed that he doesn't recognize me while he's doing whatever it is he's doing, while he's gonna, you know, search through whatever it is he has to search through. It could be like a book of spells, or like, you know, I might be visible to him. And so Lila says, well, then just be discreet. I don't know how you could possibly do that, but see if you could make it happen. And so she tries, but instead Samira just appears right in front of Lila, not inside of the home. So then Roderick says, well, maybe you could, with your mind and you guys sharing a conscience, maybe the two of you could just work hard enough together to make her appear in the home. And so Lila's like, well, how do I do that? I don't know the rituals. Remember, I don't really know how this power works. And so the two of them start to brainstorm. They start coming up with random things. And Roderick is like, you guys are running out of time. This man could very well be doing whatever it is he went in there to do. And so eventually Lila's like, our best bet is me just concentrating on you being inside of the home. And if that doesn't work, we're screwed. So that's what she does. She closes her eyes and she envisions Samira inside of Professor Short's home. She opens her eyes and she does not see Samira in front of her anymore. So she says, Samira, can you still hear me? And Samira responds in her head, in Lila's head. And she was like, I'm in his room and I am looking directly at him. And so then Lila conveys the info to Roderick. And he was like, well, can he see her? And Samira confirms that he cannot. So then she's like, all right, well then what is he doing? And she says that he's looking inside of this book. He's frantically flipping through pages. And so Samira gets closer and she sees that it is this special book, this ancient book that is designed to aid in people obtaining a great deal of power over a large number of entities at one time. And obviously you can do it in different ways. You know, there's hypnosis, there's a spiritual way, and then there's of course summoning dark powers. And so he's looking to see now what he did that I guess led to someone discovering something that he was not expecting anyone to discover. And the fact that he heard it made things a little bit too real for him. And so that's why he's rushing, flipping through pages, trying to figure out, like, do I need to go back to Epstein Street and try to put this thing to rest again? And so Lila says, just pay attention to the page that he's on. And so Lila says she knows the name of the book. She sees the page that he's on and he's skimming through the words again. And he's like, he says out loud, I don't think I missed anything. I swear I did this right. How could they possibly know what's going on there? And he's just thinking out loud. He picks up the book and he begins to pace the room and he's like, what did I do wrong? Where did I go wrong? What is this article she's talking about? And then he stops and he's like, I knew there was something up with Lila. I knew there was something up with her. And so then Lila immediately says, we need to get that book. I'm sure that it's not something that's available in the local Barnes & Noble down the street. We need to confiscate that book. And so then Samira's like, well, I can't take it. I need real fingers that can, you know, actually come in here and get the book. And so then Roderick's like, we'll have to break in. We're gonna have to do this. And so then eventually Professor Schwartz puts the book down, closes the book, and he's like, I am not gonna let this drive me crazy. I know I did everything right. And he walks out of the room and he paces back in the room and his hand is under his chin. And he's like, something isn't making sense here. She's messing with me. I know she's messing with me. And so then Samira finally conveys to Lila and Roderick that he's beginning to be onto her. So if they're gonna get this book, they have to plan to do it shortly. She extracts she extracts Samira from the house and they head on back to Lila's apartment and they begin to brainstorm. So Roderick basically says, we're gonna have to pay close attention to this man's movements. So one of us is gonna have to break in while the other one watches out for when he's coming back and when he's leaving. We now know where he lives, so that's step number 1. And so then Samira says he is onto us, so he will probably be anticipating that we're coming for that book. I should have probably stuck around longer to see if he put it back in the same place that it was when he first went there. When we first, entered his home. And so then Roderick was like, I don't know. It kind of seemed like with the way, you guys were telling me what was going on, that he was way too caught up in how he was going to get discovered. And sometimes when you're frantic and panicked, you don't always pay attention to fine details like hiding the evidence. So let's keep our fingers crossed and, maybe just lay low for a second. Lila's not scheduled to have his class again until Thursday. It was a Tuesday-Thursday class. That's how it works in college. For those of you who are unaware, it's either Monday, Wednesday, Friday class or Tuesday-Thursday class. And sometimes it's one class for like 6 hours on a Thursday. She has 24 hours to make this happen. If it doesn't happen on Wednesday, then on Thursday, it is for sure that Professor Schwartz will use that as an opportunity to question Lila, and they need to have a plan. So it's now Tuesday night, and they check to see what other classes Professor Schwartz is scheduled to be teaching on Wednesday. He has one class early in the morning, one class late in the afternoon, and then the final class at night, 7 to 9:30. So Roderick says we're going to have to make it work during one of those times. And my guess is that we'll have to make it work during the late afternoon class to the evening class, because chances are low that he's going to plan to go back home in between two courses that are close to one another. So that's what they do. Fast forward to the day that they have to execute this plan and get to Professor Schwartz's house to confiscate this book. So Lila is at the school on Wednesday. She doesn't have any classes on Wednesday, but she's there with stuff to just at least make it look like she's studying. But she's keeping an eye on Professor Schwartz. She's studying near his classroom so that she can at least let Roderick know when she sees him leave the classroom. Roderick is now actively trying to figure out the best way to enter Professor Schwartz's home. They don't know if this man has an alarm. They don't know if this man has cameras. They obviously have not done enough research, but they're going to make it happen anyways, because desperation makes you do some really interesting things. So Roderick skims the home. He's sort of walking around the house, trying to make it look like, he's just part of the neighborhood. Now, it's the part of the evening where the sun hasn't completely set, but they only have about 15 minutes or so where it is completely dark outside. It is supposed to be wintertime. It is not spring or summer where the sun hangs out for longer, okay? And they're gonna use the darkness to their advantage. This is late afternoon now, going into the evening. So he finally sees a window that's cracked, but if he sticks his hand into the window, there isn't necessarily really anything that he could reach for to open a door. So he's thinking, I just might have to pry this window open. He applies some gloves so that his fingerprints don't stick around. He pulls his shaggy hair up and he puts on a hairnet so that his hair doesn't stray. He did think about some things ahead of time. And he puts his back into prying the window open. Lucky for him, it pries open and an alarm does not sound. He stumbles inside and he hears this loud thud to his right. He startles, turns around, and sees that a cat just hopped off the table. He takes a deep breath, starts to walk towards the room that Samira described to Lila and that Lila then described to Roderick. He's tiptoeing up the steps. He pulls open the drawer. The book is not there. He shuts the drawer and he's like, shit. Shit. He turns around and he's like, it's gotta be in here somewhere. And so he starts sort of, not really, but kind of sort of turning things upside down, and he's looking for it. And so eventually Lila calls him and she's like, you gotta get out of there. This man, the class is coming to an end and we don't know if he's gonna go home or not. And so maybe about 30 seconds goes by and students start to file out of the classroom and she's like, shit, the class ended earlier than I thought. And then she sees another man, not Professor Schwartz, walk out of the classroom. And she's like, Roderick, stop. I think we're too late. There's somebody else teaching Professor Schwartz's class. Professor Schwartz is probably on Epstein Street. We have to go. So Roderick flies out of the house, tries to put everything back the way he found it, and him and Lila meet up, and Samira is with them, a part of them, and they gun it for Epstein Street. And so they get to Epstein Street and they see Professor Schwartz standing in front of Nick's diner. And he's not doing anything, he's not saying anything, he's just standing there. And he's got the book under the crook of his arm. And so then, they're not necessarily on Epstein Street, but they're at a corner that's far enough for him to not know they're there, but also close enough for them to see him standing in front of Nick's diner. So as they're observing his stance, he's not doing anything. Professor Schwartz is just kind of standing there. And so Lila summons, but Lila sort of reaches out to Samira to see if she too is a part of her conscience in order to see what's going on. And so Samira confirms her presence. And so she asks Samira, what do you think is going on? And Samira said he's likely just back here to figure out if he did something wrong. He's probably trying to pick up on the energy. And so Lila and Roderick are both confused. They're like, isn't he afraid? And so Samira reminds them that he is technically the master. He's the one that put them here, the dark shadows. He's the one that placed them here. And he's now, I guess, just trying to figure out how Lila is aware of what's going on, because I'm sure he has done his research and was not able to, find anything concrete on the people that are technically still alive on Epstein Street, 1. 2, he wants all of his ducks in a row before he approaches Lila about her knowledge. And so Roderick says, we have to do something. He's right there. The book is right there. We have to do something. And so both Lila and Samira completely disagree. Roderick begins to approach him, and he tells Lila to stay where she is. Why does Roderick do that? Probably because all he's thinking about is Jacob, and the fact that Jacob is only where he is because of this guy, Professor Schwartz. And sometimes when these men see something that cause a reaction, they don't really think. They just they gun for it. The logic sort of disappears for a second. And so he just goes and stands right next to Professor Schwartz, and Professor Schwartz startles and the book falls out his hand. And they both look at the book. And Lila and Samira are both standing there in anticipation. And everyone is like, oh God, oh God, oh God. And then it happens. Roderick reaches for the book, and now they're both fighting over it, and he's trying to get him in a chokehold. They're both yelling things at one another, and eventually Professor Schwartz gets Roderick in a chokehold, and he's like, how do you know about this place? Why are you here? How are you able to be here? And he's struggling, he can't breathe, he's tapping, and so eventually Lila's like, we have to do something. And Samira's like, this is a horrible idea. We have to stop. We need to stop. And so then Lila goes over there, and Professor Schwartz sees her, and he begins to loosen his grip, and he falls back, and he's like, I knew you had something to do with this. And he gets up and charges for her, and then immediately Samira appears in the flesh and stops him. And everyone stops. And he goes ashen. Professor Schwartz goes ashen. And she's like, you can see me. And he reaches for her, and he can touch her. And everybody is standing there in complete silence. And I think this will have to be where we put a pause. I promise the next Epstein Street is coming. But I gotta leave y'all with the cliffhanger, especially because I've already started working on the next Epstein Street. Catch up on all of them. Check out Blake Quake Beats. Check out my literary masterpieces, my new music. Check me out. Thank you for your support. Thank you for your patience, your comments, your interactions. Keep it coming. Tell your friends to subscribe. Get these views up. Thanks.
Epstein Street.